evening. I'm going to call to order the Reno City Planning Commission Wednesday, March 7th edition. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I will ask Commissioner Hawkins to lead us this evening.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Michelle, can I get roll call when you're ready?
Okay, Mark Johnson.
Here.
Britton Griffith is absent. Ed Hawkins. Here. Paul Olivas.
Here.
John Marshall is absent. Kevin Weisky.
Here.
And Peter Gower.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 3 is public comment, and this item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. And I do have a couple request to speak forms. Just a reminder, whether for this item or for a future item, if you do wish to make a comment, please fill one of these out. You'll have 3 minutes at the podium to make your comment. And we will start with our first one, Tammy Holt Still. Please state your name when you get to the podium.
Maybe I want to reduce that down. Okay. Ew. Tammy Holt Still, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. For the record, the water's still there. I'm still here. In fact, the water's actually spreading further. What you see before you came from Conservation and Natural Resources from the state of Nevada. It gives you an idea for 2017 where things were at. And last night was not a good night for us residents out there. We were fighting with the Planning Commission for Washoe County, which we failed. They approved the Lemon Valley is Highlands, which is a 209 or 206 home development, which if you do the math, that makes 600 and some odd rooms, times that by 120, you're up there in the 70,000 gallon range. So on top of the fact that Washoe County is already at their limit as far as what they're supposed to be discharging, now they're adding that. Besides, you guys approved the 10,000 square foot facility, and that is going to that same sewer plant. Then you add into it, I don't know if you know this, and I didn't bring the paperwork to show it to you, but I received from Washoe County the report on how much money they have put into that to save it from the lake, from the affluent water and the storm runoff. It has been $633,000 put into saving that from the affluent water. This has got to stop. There needs to be a moratorium until the fluent water is put someplace else. You have control of the storm water. The word is control. The water needs to be controlled. Letting it flow out of Swan Lake and into residents, or right now to the HESCO barriers, but those can't be there forever. In fact, Lemon Drive is getting really close to being closed again because the water's encroaching right there at between Arkansas and Deodore. So it won't be long. That will be closed, especially since we know there's another storm coming in on Friday. And it's supposed to be warm, and it's going to take what snow's left and melt it. And then we're going to be back in the same boat we were last year. So I really hope you think twice before you start approving other developments in the North Valleys, because right now you don't have any place for the affluent to go without damaging somebody else. We don't need to be wasting money on paying for liability. You know, the taxes need to go for fixing, not backtracking. So the city of Reno and Washoe County rolled the dice and rolled the dice. Well, they finally hit snake eyes. So to keep rolling the dice when you don't have the money is not a good thing. So please, say no on developments right now. Tell them they have to hold off or have them pitch in on helping you fix it, because ultimately I think somebody said it, we're not here, you guys are not there to make them money. They want to make money, it's their responsibility to figure out how to do it and benefit everybody instead of hurting existing residents. And an $8 million fix that is going to take a special assessment district and assess residents who are on septic tanks that have been out there since the 70s? Wrong. We're not going to stand for that either. That is not how you're going to fix your situation, by assessing the people that don't even use the facilities to begin with. So there's where we stand on some of those issues. Thank you for listening. Have a good night.
Thank you. Next up, I have Johnny Lawrence.
Not sure how to make this play, so let's just bring it in like this. That is a 2005 Dodge Magnum show
Johnny,
car.
can you just state your name for the record, too?
Oh, my
please?
name is Johnny Madrid Lawrence.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My daughter was being a butt. I had to bring her in. She wouldn't go to sleep, and I said, I can't miss this, so.
She's a cutie.
Okay, question.
I need you to speak
got
into
a
the
lot of
microphone, though, please.
Johnny, just bring the microphone.
Sorry, I'm not good with a mic.
It's all right.
No, good. Thank you, sir. Okay, so. You want to be up there and talk or something? You just can't touch the mic, okay? Don't be touching the mic. Don't be touching the mic. Let's just do this, because I know I got 3 minutes, so. Can't have no more than 3 minutes. Stay off the mic. Can anybody tell me what this is? The guy's looking in the trunk. He's got an air ride system, so he's got to air it up to make sure when he pulls off after taking pictures of that car at the Believe sign. Check this out. Tell me what you think. He's waiting to air it up so he can pull off. He was told to leave by the police, but check this out. See the car moving? See the car moving? Did we all catch all that moving? What am I showing you, you're asking? They have a case number for that incident right there. That's police brutality, that's whatever you want to call that. I don't know where to go with this. I spoke with a couple people before. I don't know what else to do. I haven't put it out on the news, I haven't been broadcasting, but I'm really tired of a lot of crap and trying to blow it off like it's nothing. That's a serious incident. My knees hurt, my car is messed up now. Okay, the speakers in the back, the amp, all that he threw me into my trunk and snatched me out of it. It's still in storage. That car's been in storage since I bought it. At the last Barrett Jackson auction they had up here, the last one they had, that's where I bought that car from for $22,000. It's worth more than that. I don't have a problem with haters. Haters are awesome. That car's been in storage for 3 years. Doesn't go on the street. It's never been on the snow. It's never been on wet pavement. It's never been anything like that. It's got 30,334 miles on it. All right? For that officer to do whatever he did. You all right, baby? You all right? We're ready to leave, all right? We're leaving. So anyways, I hope that video speaks for itself, because she's irritated. She just gave me, 3 minutes, and I didn't get all that. So I'm hoping somebody will get back with me and try to explain police brutality, or if that's just what Reno doesn't care about. It seems like you guys don't care about much, but now, showing you a video, I'm hoping somebody realizes that could have been their son, their daughter, whoever, but it wasn't. All right, people? Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anyone else wishing to make a comment under general public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the minutes from our January 25th workshop, which was the Planning Commission's workshop for goal setting. If there aren't any changes, I would entertain a motion.
Commissioner Johnson, move to approve.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weisky, second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item number 5, City Council Liaison Reports. And I believe Councilwoman Breckus is here to give us an update. Welcome.
Hi, how are y'all today? Good. This is just my quarterly visit with y'all, and I want to say thank you for all your service in this new year, 2018. We've been busy at the council, and I know that you all have been busy down here. We don't see that everything comes up. We mostly have been seeing things on appeals, and more on appeals that have gone through you than other things that come through to us, through that process. Stonegate, of course, we both see because it's a zoning change master plan. That's still under review. We'll be hearing a second reading on that next meeting on the next Wednesday. I'll fill you in more about that as that goes through the process, but I think some of you who are at regional planning will see that if you're, those of you who sit at regional planning. I wanted to kind of take a step above and talk to you about master plan implementation. I'm really ready and hoping that we can get the resources to start to implement the master plan. The two issues that I see as most important are going back into the quadrants of the city. I can't remember what master plan policy it is, and understanding within each quadrant where are we best equipped to serve what land when. If does no good to do an entitlement way out here if we've got land on the path that is, available, and we'll be absorbing that first. And that's the theme that really caught me out of the master plan. And we are also going to track the land supply too. We did so much work in that little bit, understanding what housing numbers we needed when, and I think those numbers are still good. But making sure and seeing as land goes through the process from subdivision, final map, building, build out, absorption, then, we'll know in each quadrant when's the next land to come on. So I'm really looking forward to that work. And I think some of the other work that could help us is a way of modeling development projects, large scale ones, economically, to understand, is it going to cost more to serve than what it'll give off in revenue. And that's going to be, everything doesn't have to, we're not a for-profit business, but it'll help us give some tools to compare. And rather than what the basis has been, what's been supplied by developer reps, which, we just need a standardized model. So those are things I'm looking forward to. And then, of course, the zoning change, the zoning code, most importantly. That's a headache for everyone. I think that's something everyone is working in development in Reno, impacted by it, like a lot of the residents who come out can agree upon. One thing I do want to talk about, and maybe you all could, think about it too, is the holding pattern of subdivisions I find very problematic. We've been dealing with that at the city council. I think we've had a subdivision that's been on twice now. Continue. I think it had 3 continuances down here with you all. Some of them I think were noticing errors, and I don't want to pick on that one. I just want to share with you, when I started my career at the city of Albuquerque and we had planning commission and then city council, things got one shot. One shot. And it was to the developers and the developer applicants to know if they weren't ready to rock and roll, it's not going to go. And if it has to get pulled, it's kind of on a dead sort of thing. I think we've been a little too letting things come for their public hearing when they're not quite ready. And I think that everyone needs to, particularly if a developer starts representative starts saying, well, I'm counting noses, or, there's a lot of disgruntled neighbors, then you're in control of the process, put it on when you are on, because I think it really is not fair, particularly when you have a lot of neighborhood impacts, to have something come 3 or 4 times. And I don't think it's fair to all of us who give up our evenings either. So I think some of these, we have some provisions of the code that treat it a little bit differently. I think it's something we should address. But I think that, things get real ready to go up or down, and that's the most fair to everyone when they come through. And that's what I'd like to see. There's no magic time that says something has to come by a hearing at a certain date. If it's not there, it's not there. So that's one thought that I've been working on a bit, because I think we do an inordinate amount of continuous continuations of different development requests here at the City of Reno, and we've kind of gotten into a norm that I don't think is typical of other jurisdictions. It might be something you want to ask staff to look into and help you think about if you're feeling the same way. Any questions for me from any of you?
Questions for Councilwoman Breckus? Commissioner Hawkins?
Still wondering what we're gonna do about us getting a say-so on the annexation of land in the city of Reno. That is a land use thing that we'd like to probably look at,
Which land do we want to annex? I'm sorry.
allowing the Reno Planning Commission to make a decision before
Oh.
it comes to you on annexation.
I am 100% with you. That was pulled out of the Reno Development Code when the city council did not like the answers they were getting on annexation requests from a planning commission that was doing their job. And I will make that, I will go with that, for a long time. And I want you also to see abandonments. I am so tired of seeing abandonments come up to the city council and then, 3 or 4 months later, you're all looking at a special use permit for that same ground. They get coupled, and we need to get that and make sure that happens. So I'm in agreement with you, but I would urge those of you who are on the regional planning to just start talking about getting that plan done. It is taking too long, and we have a annexation program that has expired. That doesn't help anyone, so we need to get rolling on that at that level. And I sit on the governing board, and I've been, talking about that too. So thank you for your input. We went into budget early. We're not in a real happy place. We're got a new finance director, a new city manager. They're looking at it from a new set of eyes, and they're showing us that one-time, budgeting tricks that we've done, just not sustainable. We're at the end of our rope on that. So we're starting with a $5 million budget deficit. It's going to be some hard decisions for us to make. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next quarter. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 6, which is acceptance of the City of Reno Planning Progress and Priorities Report. And I believe Heather is here to give us a presentation on that. Heather, welcome.
Good evening, Chair Gower and Planning Commission members. Heather Manzo, Assistant Planner for the record. Back on January 25th, the Planning Commission held their annual workshop to set goals for the coming year. And as a part of the annual reporting that gets forwarded on to the Regional Planning Commission for review and potential acceptance, the Planning Commission did update their 2018 goals to carry forward the 8 goals that had been previously established. The Commission felt that those goals were still valid and should be focused on again this year. And in addition to those existing goals, the Planning Commission did add 2 additional goals, one of them being development within the North Valleys. The Planning Commission felt that the North Valleys is a unique part of the city of Reno and wanted to emphasize the goal toward that uniqueness. And then also a housing diversity goal. And a lot of these goals will be implemented with the upcoming adoption of the Reno Master Plan. These will be implemented through adoption of that, as well as a carry forward as we move forward with the city code update. That really concludes my presentation. The report is available to the Planning Commission tonight, should you move to recommend acceptance of that and move it forward to City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, you'll remember the workshop that we had on the 25th and seeing the feedback getting captured into that report that Heather put together in the staff report for us. Any feedback, questions on that? Or does everything look great and you're ready to make a motion on it? Commissioner Marshall.
I can't help but point out that under communication, it says to go to the NAB for open discussion. And I tried to do that, but they forced me into public comment. So I'm not certain how I can satisfy my open discussion requirements. But other than that, thank you, Heather, for putting all our comments and direction into the report.
Thank
I'm
you.
ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we accept the report.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
Have a motion and a second, any discussion? See none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. We'll move on then to item number 7. This is our unfinished business public hearing section, and our first and only case under that one this evening is case number LDC 18-0015 Silver Dollar Estates. And before we get started on it, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Johnson for disclosure.
Thank you, Chair Gower. I have to disclose that the company that I work for has business with the Washoe County School District, who is a party in this. So as a result, I will recuse myself based on any potential evidence of issues. So I will be recusing myself. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we will start off then. Jeff, you're up there. You're ready to lead us off here.
So rather than going in our traditional order of having the applicant come up first and then staff follow, I thought I would come up first and introduce the item just because there is a back history here and we are on our third time hearing this item. So on November 16th, this was originally heard. The applicant did request continuance, was continued at that point. And then on December 7th, the Planning Commission requested continuance to take a look at the capacity in Swan Lake, effluent issues, drainage, and traffic issues in the community. So the applicant has addressed that. I will turn it over to Stacy for a presentation. But first, I wanted to quickly highlight some of those conditions that were listed originally in the first time we heard this. Just to refresh everybody's memory, the applicant did request modifications to conditions number 23, 24, and 30, and staff was in support of those. They did withdraw their request for modification to condition number 12 with regards to the dark skies lighting condition. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stacy, and I will be available for any questions as well during this process.
Okay, thanks. Stacy, all yours.
I'm not that tall. Good evening. Thank you for having us back tonight, as Jeff said, for the third time. Stacy Huggins, for the record, with Wood Rogers, representing the applicant, D.R. Horton. I also want to mention that we have in the audience Paul Salegi, if there are any traffic questions. Washoe County School District is here, and Julie Masterpool with RTC is here. I just really quickly want to touch as just a refresher. Again, this project has split zoning on the properties, SF6 on the north, community commercial on the south. The SF6 allows the detached product. Cluster development is allowed with a special use permit, and the single family attached is also allowed. In the community commercial area, the single family attached product is allowed with a site plan review, which will also be reviewed under the special use permit. We're seeking a special use permit to allow cluster development in an effort to protect the drainage ways and establish open space on this property. And then there's also a 100-foot buffer along the south here where there's an overhead line, utility line, sorry. Again, just real briefly, tentative map and a special use permit for 619 lots, mix of detached and attached products, 25 acres of open space and common area. There is a school site included, which is why I mentioned the school district being here. This area you see in white in the middle is a future school site. It's an 8-acre school site at the request of the school district. This project includes sidewalks throughout the entire thing to ensure that students going to the school have safe access to the school from all directions. As Jeff said at the last meeting we were at, there were 4 items that were discussed, and we were asked to kind of go back and provide some more information. There was also some information that was pending from Reno Public Works regarding some of the infrastructure, and so we are here tonight following that workshop that I think Mr. Flansburgh gave to this commission a couple weeks ago. So I want to start off talking about stormwater mitigation. The project is outside of the 100-year flood zone. It's in accordance with the Truckee Meadows Regional Drainage Manual and the Public Works Design Manual. The project has to address increased impervious areas. We do that by providing detention and retention basins, and I've highlighted on this site, there are 4 of them, which these arrows are showing. Those basins are designed to mitigate increased storm runoff, which is the retention portion of the basin, and increased stormwater volume, which is the detention part of the basin. So first looking at retention, and I'm going to break this down into a couple of slides. Retention looks at the 100-year, 10-day storm. We looked at NOAA, who's the weather service. They estimate 11.7 inches of precipitation coming through this site based on the watershed, the existing watersheds. Based on that precipitation from NOAA and the developed acreage, the project is required to provide retention for 37,000 CFS, or 0.85 acre feet. So when we look next at detention, we have to provide detention for the 100-year, 24-hour storm. Retention, 100-year, 10-day, detention, 100-year, 24-hour storm. The NOAA estimate for a 24-hour storm in this area is 4.7 inches of precipitation. Storm flows have to match pre-development flows. It's a requirement of the design manual, so we have to ensure that we do that. This exhibit, which is on the slide here, is the same exhibit that I showed at the December meeting. The red numbers, which I know you can't read, indicate the existing flows on through these various watersheds through existing drainages that go through this site. The green numbers represent the post-development flows. What I want to point out is that the pre-development right now, with no development on this site, has 510.9 cubic feet per second of flow based on the 24-hour storm. The post-development flow is 510.4. It's actually been reduced as a result of adding those basins, which are a combination of retention and detention, for the 24-hour storm. So it is reduced as a result of this project, even with the increased impervious surface. Just kind of to show how these basins work as a combination, and I mentioned all 4 basins on this project will be designed as a combination retention detention basin. So again, we're retaining for a 100-year 10-day storm, and that essentially happens in the lower portion of the basin where the water is retained. It will either infiltrate into the ground or evaporate. For the detention portion, where we're detaining for the 24-hour storm, again, that would be the 4.7 inches estimated by NOAA. That is above the retention area. It's designed to meter the water out of this pipe so that it slowly flows back to the lake or its intended location. It doesn't go fast. It's intended to meet or match the existing flow that existed prior to the development. The additional water is retained in the lower area. And I do have our engineer here who can talk in more detail about how these retention detention basins really work after I'm done with my presentation. I want to mention that these basins and the drainage ways all have to be maintained by the HOA, and that there is a condition of approval associated with this project that clarifies that an O&M manual has to be established, it has to be adopted, and the HOA has to abide by it in order to maintain those drainage ways so that they continue to work through the duration of their life. When we look at this, I mentioned this at the last meeting, we're also providing LID strategies throughout this project. Retention basins in the drainage ways, The roundabout that's in the middle at Trading Post and Silver Dollar will include a landscape center with bioretention. We have parkway strips along the streets with trees and shrubs and rocks. The cluster development in itself results in significant amount of open space. 27% of the site is in open space, which also reduces that impervious area. And then we have a landscape detention basin, 2 of them up in the northern area. So the combination of these drainage ways, the detention basins, the LID strategies assure that post-development drainage is the same, and actually in this case better than the pre-development drainage. The second issue is the sewer. When we were here before, we had anticipated at that time this project to generate 262,000 gallons per day to the treatment plant. After Mr. Flansburgh's presentation 2 weeks ago, the numbers, we realized different numbers were being used, and so we've adjusted our number, and now to match the numbers that he had presented, the sewer generation number from this project is estimated at 139,000 gallons per day to the treatment plant. Kind of taking from what Mr. Flansburgh said and some additional conversations with staff, we are to understand that the plant has 2 million gallons, has a capacity of 2 million gallons per day, and is currently operating at 1.6 million gallons per day, which leaves some additional capacity in that plant. For this project is within that additional 0.4 million gallons per day that remains on the site. We have offered a condition that I think you all received that confirms that we can't proceed with this project without a will serve letter from the city of Reno. That is Reno code, but as an effort to make sure that it's clear that we will meet that standard, we have included a condition to that effect. Really quick on the effluent. Mr. Flansburgh also talked, there was quite a bit of discussion about the effluent flowing to the lake. NDEP authorizes the city of Reno to discharge the effluent to the 100-year flood elevation. The exhibit on the overhead shows the various years that the 100-year line was mapped. That's based on FEMA maps throughout the years. The blue line is the 2009 line. It's the most current FEMA mapped line. The orange line was established in 1978. The red line was established in 1990. And really the difference in those lines was the designation of the base flood elevation, the BFE. The datum shifted and the base flood elevation was adjusted slightly. But you'll note that really those 3 lines are almost exactly the same in all of those years, dating back as far back as 1978. Swan Lake storage at that 100-year elevation is 10,800 acre feet. 1 acre foot represents 0.0073 inches of rise in lake level. It's very, very small. The effluent that's discharged into the lake from the Reno Stead wastewater facility is estimated at approximately 8 inches annually over the whole year, not all at once, over the whole year. And that doesn't take into account evaporation. I know this year the evaporation was less than in normal years, but typically, and there is data to support this, the lake evaporates for somewhere between 2 and 4 feet annually. So in a normal year where we don't have 19 atmospheric rivers, the lake would have evaporated based on historical data. Worst case scenario, as far as this project goes, if the lake is full and there is no evaporation, the effluent from this project would raise the level of the lake by less than 1 inch over the entire year. And that's consistent with the NDEP allowed discharge amounts. It doesn't exceed that. Finally, looking at increased traffic. Before I talk about the increased traffic on 395, I want to just touch on traffic related to the project itself. This project was scoped with City of Reno engineering staff. The staff identified specific intersections to study. Mr. Salegi studied those intersections and provided a traffic report with the initial submittal. That traffic study estimated 4,494 ADT with 438 PM peak trips based on build-out, 619 lots. We did receive comments from RTC regarding Trading Post and Silver Dollar being designed to collector street status. They have been designed in the proposed plans to reflect that. They also asked for improvements at Sky Vista and Trading Post. The exhibit that's on the overhead represents the improvements that they have asked for and that we are showing. So that includes an extension of left turn pockets on Sky Vista, an additional right turn lane on Sky Vista, as well as conduit for a future traffic signal at this intersection. There aren't warrants here for that traffic signal yet, but in anticipation of that coming, and because of the future impact on Sky Vista Parkway, we have agreed to install that conduit at that intersection. And when the warrants are there, that signal can be installed. So when we look at the increased traffic on 395, and the packet that I provided prior to this meeting included a freeway capacity analysis prepared by Mr. Salegi, we found through discussions with NDOT that 395 north of the Spaghetti Bowl operates in various segments at level of service C or D. NDOT feels that level of service D for that road is acceptable. And they do not believe that improvements on that road are necessary today or as a result of this project being built out. Level of service D is an acceptable level of service for NDOT on this road. I want to just note on this that the proposed project is not anticipated to contribute residential traffic on the roadway network until 2019. We do know that NDOT is working on a restriping project on 395 that will allow an additional lane to be added to that segment of the road. But it's not a full widening or reconstruction project. It is a striping effort with some minor other improvements for on-ramp, off-ramp situations. So in closing, I just want to touch on, and I know I have 30 seconds, I hope you'll let me finish. I just want to touch on the estimate of fees associated with this project. I mentioned this the last time we were here. This project can generate a minimum of $7 million in development fees that will go towards fixing or helping to address problems or concerns. I want to specifically point out $2.4 million in RTC fees for maintaining and improving roads in the area. We've talked to RTC. It's possible that those impact fees can be used for improvements at Sky Vista Parkway. And they are here to answer those questions. $3.9 million in sewer connection fees goes towards a sewer treatment plant. The school site, which is an economic benefit to the overall community. Just want to close by saying, we still feel that these uses as proposed are in conformance with the zoning and are appropriate for the area. We believe this project should be approved as presented and with the conditions of approval, including modifications to conditions 23, 24, and 30 that Jeff mentioned, as well as conditions 50, 51, and 52, which we asked to be added at the last meeting. So I apologize for going a little over, but thank you.
And for the record, it's Commissioner Weisky. I have just been recently deputized as our vice chair for a few minutes. So I will continue the meeting on. We still have a quorum, we're fine. We're within our boundaries. Jeff, call you back up if you have anything before we go to public comment.
I have nothing else to add other than I'm just available for any questions, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. At this time, I will turn it back over to Commissioner Gower if he's ready. If not, Commissioner Olivas, why don't we do disclosures, please? We'll start with you.
Commissioner Olivas, I visited the site, spoke to the applicant's representative, and received emails.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Gower, I previously visited the site and spoke to the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Hawkins spoke to the applicant and the applicant's representative. I drive past this site every day, and we received one or two emails. Thank you.
Commissioner Wieski, same disclosures as before. I visited the site, spoke with the applicant's representative this time also.
Okay.
Thank you. With that, Chair Gower, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks for taking over there, Commissioner Wieski. Appreciate that. At this point, I am going to open up the public hearing portion of this item, and we'll go from there. So, let's open public comment, and we will begin with Tammy Holtstill, followed by Ed Hughes.
Tammy Holtstill, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. I have a couple issues with the presentation that was just given. They're talking about only their part of it, and that they're only doing this much to a lake that is already this much. That is a little short-sighted and I think inappropriate, and definitely not interested in what's best for a valley that has got a situation on its hands. And it's going to be on your guys' shoulders to start doing what's best, not what's best for them, not what's best for you, but what's best for the community in a whole. Traffic, a D is okay. You wouldn't want your kids coming home with a D on their report card. So why is a D okay for us to waste our time to get to work? I think that is a little short-sighted too, and kind of callous if you think about it. She obviously doesn't live out there, and neither do the people that she represents, because if she did, she would think that that was absolutely the way that it is right now. It's ridiculous that it takes almost 45 minutes to get to work when you start work at 8 o'clock. I did it for a little while, and then I retired. So there's some issues here that they addressed, and they made it sound so pretty and so wonderful. And I definitely liked their retention, detention thing that they had going. Maybe something like that needs to be done to Swan Lake so that it can go someplace else. And then you can build out as much as you want in the front of the valley where people can sit on top of each other. Great. Those of us in the back that have an acre or more, we want it to be rural. We don't want to be touching the person next door to us or having somebody peeping in our windows. That's why we bought where we bought, to be out in the open and to be dark and see the animals and everything. So those are the things you need to think about and need to look at. And please, as much as it looks like a great thing and they're really supposedly trying their best, there's still issues that have not been addressed by the city of Reno to make this happen. You're still putting too much pressure on a lake that is out of its boundaries, is flooding other residents, and the only reason that it's not flooding all of the residents anymore is because of a temporary HESCO barrier that is falling apart already. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ed Hughes, followed by Arch Ruth.
My name is Ed Hughes. I just had a couple concerns regarding this project. One is and it's a lot of different projects that are going out there right now, and that's traffic. I mean, it's 45 minutes to get to work now, but I mean, what's acceptable? I mean, if you have an 8 to 5 job, you know, get an hour lunch, and you're leaving at 7 o'clock in the morning, and getting home at 6 o'clock at night, you know, that's 11 hours you're away from your family for your job. I mean, I don't know what's acceptable for you guys, but you guys keep on approving stuff out there, you, Washoe County, and their traffic solutions, they're putting in a couple lights next to the freeway. That's going to have traffic backed up to Military Road. I mean, Ed, probably the only person I know where I'm talking about, but it's getting out of hand. The other concern is the water. I mean, that presentation, I mean, it's lovely on paper, but when you start cementing all this stuff in, it doesn't drain into the ground anymore. And I've watched this, you know, I've lived out in the valley for 22 years. I've watched it get worse and worse and worse. It doesn't drain into the ground anymore. They keep on making these presentations, but again, they look great on paper. They're not real. I mean, when you get, I mean, there's a development right next to it that's doing a bunch of apartments. And the one flood that we had in the wintertime had them out there with pump trucks, and they were pumping it into the drainage ditch. I walked back there to behind their solution to it, and they have 2 drainage ditches going into the freeway that are huge, going into one small pipe. It doesn't work. I don't know where they're getting these numbers from. It doesn't make any sense. To be quick, the last thing I want to let you in on is there's an old road that goes there. It was the first paved road in the state of Nevada. It started construction in 1918. I think it was done in 1923. A couple of the developments have included that in their development or some signage, but it's a piece of Reno history that's being erased. Reno is pretty good at erasing their histories. Look at the empty lot next to us. It's just something to think about. I mean, when you keep on all these developments, you don't include, you know, what was already there, we lose who we were. So anyway, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Arch Ruth, followed by Melissa Byrne, I believe.
Good evening. My name is Arch Ruth. I have the honor of serving as the principal of Alice Smith Elementary in Golden Valley. And I wanted to speak in favor of this project insofar as there is land set aside for an elementary school. In the North Valleys, to speak for my community, we have just recently gone to a multi-track year-round school schedule to help alleviate overcrowding. Multiple schools in the North Valleys have had to deal with overcrowding and growth in multiple ways. As for my school and for my community, my parents, and I think they are awesome, none of us went to the multi-track year-round system thinking that that is like the best thing in the world, but rather it was a better way to protect our classes, our students and learning, and small learning communities. What we have with this development is an opportunity to provide real class space for kids and for learning in the North Valleys. So we're not talking about 5,000 portables. We're not talking about doubled up classrooms or adjusted calendars. This development will allow Washoe County School District and parents in my community to have a standard, go back to the balanced calendar. That the multi-track year-round calendar for my families has had a big impact, especially for my families that have multiple kids at multiple schools. So you have multiple calendars, multiple considerations for daycare, work considerations, travel considerations. I could go on. And insofar as my community, they have been awesome. We have made multi-track work, but this development and the land set aside for the school, or the part that we would be able to work with as a school district. I'm not sure of the exact details of how that comes together, but this provides an opportunity for my students to return to a balanced calendar schedule sooner. It provides opportunity to make sure that we have management to the overcrowding that is happening in the North Valleys and in my school, and I think it is a worthwhile project insofar as making sure we're able to take care of our kids in the North Valleys community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Melissa Burns, followed by Stephanie Lee.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Burns. I am a parent at Alice Smith Elementary. Principal Archibald Ruth is serving as a great advocate to my two children who have been going there since kindergarten. When they first started, they were on a multi-track system because of the overcrowding, and then we were able to go to a balanced calendar. Due to the overcrowding, we have gone back to a multi-track system. It is not beneficial, I would like to say, for parents such as myself. I work full-time. My husband works full-time. And it's hard when 3 months on, 1 month off, and I've got one child who's going to be going into middle school. So I've got one child in a multi-track, and I've got one child who's not going to be in a multi-track. So that's going to put a hindrance on our lifestyle, as well as our family lifestyle, because we kind of like each other and like to hang out with each other. We kind of love each other. So the Silver Dollar Estate I am advocating for because it makes sense economically as far as Nevadans for us to go ahead and not put the 7-figure digit on finding a new plot for an elementary school in North Valleys, and just going ahead and using this site right here to build a new elementary school. And the overcrowding, as I've seen, I volunteer at that school often, and since kindergarten to now, she's in 4th, he's in 6th, the class sizes, and even when we went last year and we did a walkthrough, it was, do we build more modules and play the shell game? No, that doesn't make any sense. We need to build a new elementary school to help our children and our teachers. But our children need a good education, and our teachers are able to give them that when they don't have 30 children in a classroom. I don't know about you guys if you're parents, but having 32 kindergartners in one class, I have 9 kids at my house all the time to play with. I don't know about 32 kids teaching their 1, 2, 3s and ABCs. I can't even imagine 28 6th graders. So a new elementary school would be amazing at this location. So while I support my fellow North Valleys residents that live there with the traffic issues and the site issues, it's going to be an issue, but I'm an advocate for our children getting a better education. So thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Lee, followed by George Buterak.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Lee for the record. I will want to respect your time and I don't want to be repetitive. I agree with everything Melissa just said prior to me coming up. I am a parent in the North Valleys, and just to give a little bit of perspective, I grew up in the North Valleys, and I'm so old that there was actually no freeway out there. It was a stoplight. So I do struggle with, some of the same issues that the homeowners were presenting in the beginning with, how much build is going out in the North Valleys in general all over. But I do want to advocate for my children and children coming after my children. Elementary school is such an important time. It's the foundation for their entire educational future and how they see it and what they build off of. And in agreement with Melissa, who just spoke, the classroom size is, I don't know how they manage it now, but trying to encourage teachers to be more accountable and setting the bar high starts with a manageable class size. And I think the elementary school that is already built into this project will at least relieve some of that. I don't know if it'll relieve all of it, but for sure some of it. And so for that reason, I am in support of the Silver Dollar Estates build.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. George Buterak, followed by Danny Cleus. Take your time.
Yeah, my name is George Buterak, 9660 Silver Dollar Lane. I own I have my office there. Majority of that property, I was owner at one time. And I know the history of the floods and what have you go there. You know, no one ever mentions about the 100-year floodplain. You got two of them right on that property, but that's another discussion. But I'm here tonight. I have a billboard that I gave a person that purchased the property, and I have the papers here if you want to take a look at it, the map and all that stuff. And all I want to do is that 40 years, I put it up for 44 years. And it mentions in there that the person that purchased in that, we would put an easement in there. Well, I have a road that's been going in there for 44 years. So anyhow, I want to show you that we may have a lawsuit on that. And you got about 3 or 4 other easements. And Wood Rogers, the person that's doing this stuff, he did it with the other people who are going to put a shopping center in there. And now they're putting, they're taking the easements away. They're trying to, but my lawyer says, no, it's not going to happen. So there might be a lawsuit on this, on a lot of this stuff. Where you have a problem out there, and I only got, they were going to put a turnaround by O'Brien School there. When put the shopping center in there, that would help. Chris Robinson, who's with the power company at the present time, he left the job at City of Reno, but I think that would have helped out. But that's past history. Where you have, they used to put an interchange in out there. The government got the money in about '65, and then it was going to be a cloverleaf, right where the school has the buses and that. But the thing about it is, they changed the thing from a half an acre to half a mile to a mile. But when I talked to the federal government about it, they said, well, if the city of Reno wanted that, they already had the $7.5 million for it, and that disappeared. So that's another problem. There's a lot of problems that people you never hear about, but I've been here for 60-some years. And the thing about it is, the easements and that, I have to get back to you. And then Bill Gall, you had him. I think you were the chairman that said for him, because I had a road going into my place there, and they made it emergency access. Now they changed it. You asked Mr. Gall if it's going to be international, going to be emergency access, and he said no. So I think you were the chairman at the time last year. Were you chairman last? Yeah, and you told him to get together with me to reach that, to get that easement, because I think all you voted for me on that thing, and nothing has happened. So I've been calling the city of Reno, and I got another planner that's going to talk to him also to get that thing handled. But you're doing a good job. The thing about it is, traffic's real bad out there, bumper to bumper. Even when I go in the afternoon, it's still busy, but it's going to happen. That's it. Well, thanks for your help. And I have these papers here. Would each one of you like to take a look at it?
If you'd like to submit those as part of your public
each one of
comment,
yous.
you can give them to Michelle.
Okay.
And she'll
Each
distribute.
one, and Claudia can have one too. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, George. Danny Cleus.
Dan Cleus for the record, 45-year resident of the North Valleys. Everybody's talking about schools. Well, you don't need a development for a school. I agree with them. They need a school. They need more schools, just not elementary schools. They need high schools. They need middle schools. But they don't need the development to go along with it. Not at this time. Detention, retention, all that stuff, obviously it doesn't work, because look at the valleys now. You guys put it in as code, but there's nobody to go there and enforce that code. Infrastructure first, before anything else. Our highway system, yeah, a D, whatever. What's next? F. Everybody's looking at their own little plot. They don't look at the whole picture. My little plot only adds an inch of water to that lake. Well, the next one's going to add another inch, another inch, another inch, another inch. How many inches before it's done? A lot of stuff doesn't work. It's been proven. Everybody's been saying over the years, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. This works. This works. Obviously, it doesn't. Look at the mess that's out there now. Somewhere, it has to stop. Like that girl said, she remembers the stoplights. Well, I remember when there were stop signs before those stoplights. I remember when everybody got bused into town to go to middle school. I watched O'Brien being built when I was in grade school right next door. Build the schools first, get your police first, get your fire first, get your highway system fixed first, and then bring everybody else in. I don't see what the problem is. If I want to go build a barn in my backyard, I got to go get a loan. Then I have to pay for that. The city and county should do the same. Get the infrastructure out there, go get a loan, go pay for it. Then have developers pay for that loan when they come in. Get everything done first. Don't be backwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Doug Thornley?
Good evening, Chairman Gower, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Doug Thornley, the law firm of Fenimore Craig PC. We represent the applicant, D.R. Horton. We respectfully request that you take a brief recess so that we might discuss a procedural issue with the City Attorney's Office and the Planning Manager. Thank you.
Okay. So before we get to that, if there are any other public comments on this item, now would be the time to submit those or to come up to the microphone. Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission, and we will recess for 5 minutes. I'm going to bring the meeting back to order, and at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Claudia Hanson, our planning manager, for an update on the item.
Thank you very much. As mentioned, Claudia Hanson, planning manager for the record. We have received today additional information from the Public Works Department, specifically on an update to John Flansburgh's presentation from the last Planning Commission meeting. It was very last minute, so we have some unanswered questions that we would like to look into. Staff would request that the Planning Commission entertain a continuance to the April 18th meeting for this item.
So, thank you, Claudia. So at this point, I'd be looking for a motion for a continuance date certain to April 18th.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Weisky?
Thank you. To stop the sidebar meetings within our chambers and allow our meeting to run smoothly the rest of the night, I would like to make a motion that this item be continued until April 18th, 2018, at that Planning Commission meeting.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Whoa,
Excuse me?
Commissioner Marshall.
I'm gonna vote no on that continuance.
Okay,
Thank you.
got 4-1 on the continuance. So with that, we will move on our agenda to 8.3, and just, it's in the agenda, but you'll note that 8.1 was removed from the agenda, 8.2 was postponed, so that brings us down to 8.3. Case number LDC 18-000528220 Leroy Street variance. And we'll take a presentation from the applicant's representative or staff, whoever wants to go first.
For the record, I'm Amanda Duncan from Truckee Meadows Water Authority. We have submitted to Planning Commission an application for a variance for boundary line adjustment for a parcel up on Mesa Park Road. So we originally submitted this item back in 2014 and it was approved. However, it did take quite a bit longer to handle the title issues that were involved in this property. And so unfortunately, our variance did expire. Now, Tumwa is at a point where we are ready to proceed with boundary line adjustment, and so we are resubmitting this item for approval to you. And that is it.
Okay. Thank you. Jeff, you want to add to that?
I will. So this is a variance for a reduction in lot size. The lot is already under 1 acre at 40,948 square feet. And with this reduction, it would bring it to 37,847 square feet. With the large lot residential 1 acre minimum zone, there's a 1 acre minimum for lot size. As part of this, and if I could, Michelle, could you bring that up? I think her presentation was actually better than my graphics. So if we could just bring that back up. As you can see, that red space right there, there's an existing canal that runs right through there. And so they need to take this off of, they need to take the property line back so that the canal doesn't fall on the Leroy Trust's property. And to do that, they would need to move that boundary line and therefore reduce the lot size. Unfortunately, they can't reduce the lot size because the acreage is a minimum and our code says you can't further a non-conforming condition. So this variance would allow them to do that. It would allow the liability to rest solely on Tumwa at that point. It would allow them to more adequately secure the property, and it would reduce future conflicts with adjacent owners. Staff did lay out extensive analysis on the findings. Once again, this was approved before it expired, and so they're just requesting to have this reapproved again so that they can continue with that boundary line adjustment and get that property secure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. We'll bring it back to the commission at this point for disclosures. Commissioner Weisky?
I have visited the site.
Commissioner Hawkins, no disclosures.
Commissioner Gower, I can't believe it's been 3 years, but I visited the site then.
Commissioner Johnson, as did I.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures?
Commissioner Levis, I didn't think it was 3 years even, but same disclosures.
Yep. All right, we will, since this is a public hearing item, open public comment. I do not have any requests to speak forms. Michelle, do you have any?
I think, hang on.
So I have a request to speak form from Rick and Lori Gilbert. And the comment is attached, so I'm going to read it into the record. So the comment is, in case number LDC 18-000528220 Leroy Street variance, we're very much against this property being divided. We can see no way of getting to the back half of the property without an easement being in place. If this passes, you will be changing a very large part of reason people purchase their large property lots. In addition, we just lived through the Highland Ditch project. Our road was repaired, but poorly but repaired. Now the owner of the property where the project was centered is allowing his property to be used as dirt, old road material dump. This is once again bringing big trucks on our street. The difference, they won't be repairing what they destroy, and again, he would like to sell the property for building track housing. Our road is not large enough to handle this type of traffic. I realize this would bring more revenue to the city of Reno, but it would destroy our way of living. Thanking you in advance for your consideration, Rick and Lori Gilberti, excuse me. Any other public comments on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comments and bring it back to the commission for questions, discussion, or a motion. Commissioner Marshall.
I'd like to move to continue this item.
Okay.
I withdraw the motion.
I'm just trying to lighten the mood. Well, you want to keep the motion and change it? You've got the floor, Commissioner Marshall, still.
Okay, I'd like to move approval or based on compliance with applicable findings. I move to approve the variance subject to conditions.
Okay, have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Hawkins?
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on then to item 8.4. This is case number 18-00048 Splash Bar and Nightclub. And we will begin with a presentation from the applicant's representative. Welcome.
Hey guys, I'm Brian Aranda. I'm the Business Development Manager for Splash Bar. We are here to request your approval to establish bar and nightclub use and also operate between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Just click. Splash Bar will be located in the Old Tronics building at 340 Kitsky Lane. To the north, we have Susie's. To the south, we have the Mark IV and Strike. The area is zoned arterial commercial. It's been operating as a nightclub since 1967. It was built for Nashville, Nevada. The exterior so far we've already upgraded with new landscaping. We repainted the building. We restriped the parking lot, added a trash enclosure, new LED lighting and a camera system. New signage will go up next week. A couple of the nearby neighbors have already complimented us on, cleaning it up. It was a real eyesore in the past. Splash is a family-owned company. We offer entertainment 7 days a week. We have pool tables, music videos on multiple screens. We're a video music bar, so all of the music we play, there's a video that plays on all the screens. There's no smoking indoors. You have to do it in the patio. It's 21 and up only. To LGBT is our demographic and their friends. The operator is seasoned with over 20 years of experience. We operate clubs in Sacramento, Portland, Modesto, Fresno. It's all high-end, state-of-the-art venues, very popular amongst the target demographic. And we were awarded the Lyft Award for the most drop-offs in the Bay Area. Some of the concerns that have came up, we've done this special use permit process in the past, and some of the concerns that came up were the trash loitering in adjacent properties. In order to resolve that, we would have staff duties include patrolling adjacent properties for trash and loitering with security enforcement every 30 minutes. Overflow parking was another concern. We were talking to our neighbors about a parking agreement that would allow us to use their parking at night when they're closed. All of the businesses around us typically operate between 8 and 6 p.m. We would open at 4 until 2 a.m. or later as business permits. Noise was a question. We conducted a sound study, and it concluded that the project did not affect the ambient noise level, not only at the property line, but at the nearest residentially zoned property to the east. And then as far as security, all of our locations operate with a tested, proven security plan, security staff, and top-of-the-line security camera system. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kyle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kyle Chisholm, Assistant Planner for the record. Put a map up here. So this is a request for a special use permit to reestablish to establish a new nightclub use and bar use in the AC zone, and operate 24 hours a day. The uses require a special use permit in that zone, and so do the hours of operation past 11 p.m. As the applicant has stated, this project was previously heard by the Planning Commission in 2015 for a similar project. As it was a nightclub with bar use with slightly different hours. The hours were to operate from 11 to 4 a.m. So now they're asking for 24 hours, so 11 to 6. So that's the only difference. The project is the same other than that. The Planning Commission approved that, and the applicant did not meet all the conditions of approval in the time required by the special use permit. And so they submitted a time extension. The administrator granted that time extension for 6 months. It's still, all the conditions still were not fulfilled, and so subsequently the SUP had expired. So this is a request for a new special use permit, essentially. That being said, the site is located on Kitsky Lane right here, which is, Kitsky is an NDOT owned street. And the nearest residential property is over off of Golden right here at the Indian colony. It's about 550 feet away. One of the conditions that wasn't met, the primary condition that wasn't met, was providing a sound study. That was a condition of approval of the prior SUP. The applicant has provided that sound study with this application. It's an exhibit in your staff report. And the sound study, according to the sound study, they measured sound with the sound system at operating at full capacity, approximately 102 decibels, and with the doors open, and measured no ambient noise level change at that residential property line, as well as the front property line along Kitsky Lane. So that being said, all the other conditions of approval were satisfied. As the applicant stated, they added a little bit of landscaping. It's not fully up to code, and it's an existing site, but they did add some landscaping that was conditioned with the prior SUP, basically all that they can fit in the parking lot, as well as striping and improving the curb, gutter, and sidewalk along Kitsky Lane. That being said, all the other conditions have been fulfilled. This was presented at the Ward 3 Neighborhood Advisory Board, in which there was general support for the project, that it was compatible with the area, and that it has operated essentially this way for a long time. They just never had legally established the use previously. I did receive staff did receive one email and 3 calls from nearby business owners that didn't feel that it was a suitable use for the area, and so they were opposing it. And That said, staff can make all the applicable findings and recommends approval of the project. And I can answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. We'll get back to you on the questions. Before we get there, Commissioner Olivas, will you start us off on disclosures, please?
I visited the site.
Commissioner Marshall, I've been by the site.
Commissioner Johnson visited the site.
Commissioner Gower visited the site.
Mr. Hawkins visited the site, one email.
Commissioner Weisky, I visited the site and received an email.
Thank you. At this point, I will open up the public hearing portion of this item. Michelle, do you have any requests to speak forms on this one?
Not for this item.
Okay. Anyone wishing to make a public comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kyle, can you put that drawing back up? And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to walk around to the podium and point something out.
Please do.
Kyle, last time we heard this project, this property right here was residential. And you said the nearest residential property is back over here. Has that changed? Because this made a difference to the Planning Commission when they heard this before regarding the patio and the use of patio or the hours of use of the patio.
Based on my research, Kyle Chisholm, Assistant Planner for the record, based on my research, this whole block is now zoned AC, or arterial commercial. It's not residentially zoned. So that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not residential properties in there. I believe residential isn't allowed use in AC. I would have to get back to you on that. But I believe it is. But the nearest, and again, the Colony property is the nearest residential that I can see. It's not residentially zoned because it's not within the city of Reno. So, but it's the nearest residential that has been identified.
Okay. I did not see anything in your conditions that reflect previous conversations and the previous SUP. I know that it is expired and we're starting over regarding the use of the patio after midnight, after a later hour to keep the noise levels down. Did you see any of that when you were doing your research?
I did not see that as a condition of approval with the previous entitlement. So I based a lot of what has happened in the past, the history of this, going off my best evidence, I guess, of what the Planning Commission has allowed in the past. There was no condition that regarding the hours of operation on that patio. They did install automatic closing doors for the noise mitigation end of it.
Okay.
On that patio. So, but as far as if the Planning Commission wants to entertain a condition to limit the hours on the patio, we can surely add that.
Okay. And has the applicant talked to you at all about speakers, outdoor speakers in the patio area? Is that part of their application? Or if it's not part of their application, is it allowed if it's approved tonight?
That's a great question. The applicant did not disclose that there was any sound outdoors on the sound study. It takes into consideration only the indoor sound system, so I assumed that there was no outdoor sound. But that may be a question better asked of the applicant.
Very good.
Yep.
Thank you, Kyle. If I can get the applicant back up, please. For you, state your name for the record, please.
Brian Aranda with Splash Bar. I represented the applicant in the previous special use permit, and I also worked for Tronics for the last 10 years before it closed. I called the police department to check if there had been any calls for service regarding sound, and there has never been once reported an issue.
That wasn't the question. The question is, are you proposing to put
No,
any
no
speakers
speakers.
on the outside of the building?
No, sir.
And the patio? Thank you. That's all I need.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kyle, if I could, please. What's the allowable decibel level at nighttime after 11 o'clock?
I believe Kyle Chisholm, assistant planner for the record. I don't have my code with me, but I believe it's 49 decibels at nighttime levels.
And we're looking at this report, and it's saying, what, 60, 61 decibels?
That's correct. This is a very noisy area. It's an arterial commercial. That is the ambient, and he explains that in the sound study that is the ambient level of Kitski Lane is 60 decibels. That's just with traffic and just general noise around that area, the way it's explained in here.
How many notices went out to the Indian colony?
I did look at that. I did verify that they received notice. I think they have several different offices, so I think they received a total of about 7 public notice cards.
We're still talking 750 feet from the splash bar out, as far as being noticed?
Yes, that's the requirement for noticing the 750 feet from the subject site.
And if I look at the map, we're looking at quite a few residential houses belonging to the Indian colony within that 750 feet, not just 7.
Yes, we remove repetition in ownership.
Okay.
And I did verify, just for the record, that it was noticed at 750 feet.
And why does the applicant want to go instead of 11 to 4 to 11 to 6 and make it 24 hours? To me, there's got to be a break there. I see some owners in life where they take advantage of a 24-hour situation with their employees, and I don't want to see that, but that's where I'm going with this, and I'm looking at a 4 o'clock time period.
I'd like to defer to the applicant on that, if he wants to answer that.
We originally had requested, this is Brian with Splash Bar, we had originally requested until 4 a.m., but we have seen events in Reno go much later than that. We didn't want to restrict ourselves if business allowed us to stay open later. We don't take advantage of our employees, so we would shift accordingly. Typically, we operate between the hours of 4 p.m. and 2 a.m., and then on the weekends, we tend to go until 4 a.m. naturally, but we just wanted to give ourselves that open window. We might as well, since we were doing this whole process again.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kyle, question, just checking it. It appears the only sign that they're proposing is the sign on the building, but there's mention of an existing pole sign on the site. Can you, which from the looks of it doesn't actually meet our current sign ordinance, with respect to the monument sign as a pole sign. I'm just checking, is there any requirement for that? Should they choose to add copy to that sign? I see some information in here about being reviewed. Is there upgrades? Would there be additional upgrades to the sign potentially required should they choose to activate that pole sign?
Kyle Chisholm, assistant planner for the record. So we do have provisions built into our code for abandoned signs. So if it's been abandoned for a certain amount of time, then it's essentially deactivated, and they would have to bring that into current code requirements. There was no proposal of any proposed signage with the application, so we would enact the sign abandonment ordinance if it continues not to be used, essentially.
And I'm going to jump in really quick. Claudia
you.
Hanson,
Thank
Planning
you, Claudia.
Manager. Sure. So if there's a non-conforming sign on a property and they go to expand, as you asked, there is a provision in there that the sign has to come closer to conformance. So if it's over on size, if it's over on square footage, we wouldn't allow that to expand. If it's over on height, then that we wouldn't allow it to go any higher. If one or the other is conforming and they're altering it to stay within those boundaries, then there is the sign has to, if it's non-conforming in height, it has to come down in height before you change the square footage. So there is an equation in the sign ordinance that does require bringing the sign closer into conformance before it's altered.
Okay. And then just to clarify, Brian, if you could, as I read it, the only sign that you're asking for is on the building.
There is an existing pole sign that we'd like to replace the copy on it. No changes to the sign besides replace the actual copy on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we've had, the building has been vacant this whole time. We've been in possession of it. We've operate our office, my office from it since 2015.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kyle, couple question and then a follow-up question. We talked about the noticing for the mailings. What's the noticing requirement for the physical posting on the site?
There has to be one sign of a certain size. I don't remember the exact size, posted on basically facing the public right of way, so facing the street on site.
And there's no specifications as to where that sign's posted. I'm only saying that because when I went there, normally we have the large yellow sign that's very visible from the right-of-way. When I went there, it was a small little placard size on the building from what I remember.
Right, so because it's less than an acre in size.
Is that what it is?
Yep, it's only 13,000 square feet.
Okay.
So once it gets to an acre, then you go to the larger size.
Gotcha. I'm used to the subdivision size.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
so this is a small parcel, so it's a smaller size noticing.
Okay, no, that's good to know.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
Follow-up question to Commissioner Weiske's initial comment about that residential use. Thanks to the City of Reno's free Wi-Fi, I was able to pull up the Washoe County Assessors page. So I'm looking at right now the parcel that Commissioner Weiske pointed out. And I think that's marked 4 and strike, that building right there to the south in the front. So, I mean, I'm happy to put this on the screen so the other commissioners can see it, but that building in back, the assessor is calling it zoning AC, which you indicated, Kyle, but they're also identifying a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit. So how does that change staff's analysis?
Kyle Chisholm, Assistant Planner for the record. So it's really, we don't really have anything in the ordinance that requires a residential use, a discretionary, anything for a residential use. We have provisions for residential adjacency, but that's for residentially zoned property. So I guess it's kind of similar to like a mixed use zone. If you think of it downtown, it's all mixed use. There's no residential adjacency requirement because it's all zoned mixed use. So the only thing that triggers residential adjacency or, those type of provisions is if it's residentially zoned. The fact that there's a residential use there doesn't trigger any other review. The other thing is it would be a pretty big task to search the entire radius for every single use. So we just look at the zoning of the properties. We would have to go in and search assessor's records for every single parcel and every single record in order to essentially find all the residences in a commercial zone, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense, and I know Claudia's looking through something here, and I just want to confirm that, I mean, I'm thinking of another scenario, like if you have oftentimes storage facilities have a live-in unit where the underlying zoning of the use is probably some type of commercial use, but there's actually someone living there 24 hours, it's their home. So, I mean, what provision do we have as a city to protect people in those type of situations from potentially, not complementary uses nearby?
Well, honestly, the only provision that I can think of is the provision for public noticing, is that those property owners get notice of the project that are within that vicinity. Otherwise, there is honestly no way to identify all the residences in a commercial area, because you have residential uses allowed in all these commercial areas, but they don't come up in our maps as residential. You would, again, have to go through all the assessor's records on every parcel to identify that. We don't have any requirements in our code, and that would be honestly a monumental task to do that for every project as well. But honestly, the public notice, if they don't come out and identify it, it's likely we're not going to know it unless it's clearly, I mean, looking at that map, I wouldn't be able to tell that that's a residential property. So.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Marshall.
Can I take over just for a quick sec? Just wondering, is your main concern noise?
Well,
or adjacency of incompatible uses aside from noise?
Well, my main concern is that the purpose of doing residential adjacency is to identify the compatibility of certain uses relative to residential uses, because as a residential use, it has a certain sensitivity to certain things like noise, like dust, things that might cause a nuisance to that use. And it sounds like we might have, I don't know, maybe a disconnect or just, something that's in our current system, we're not fleshing out all of the actual residential uses. So as Commissioner Weisky pointed out, and I remember this when he said he was going to go up to the screen and point something out, I knew exactly what he's going to point out, that there is in fact a residential use there.
It seemed like the last time the concern was for noise, and so therefore the noise study requirement was put into the permit. And that's what tripped them up last time, and it expired. And so now they did the noise study, and they did it at Kitski, at the edge of the property, and then on the back end next to what was thought to be the closest residence, but actually is not. There's one significantly closer, but as I look at the noise study, although they didn't put a monitor on that house, there was no increase in dBA on the street side. Now that's a little closer, but also a little noisier than behind Mark IV and Strike. So I think there may be, if it's just limited to noise as opposed to the compatibility of a bar and a patio, one parcel over from an existing residence, that's another issue. But if it's just noise, I think there may be, sufficient evidence to move forward with the consideration. It may or may not be adequate, but I don't know if that's helpful at all.
No, it is, and I was actually going to say that Kyle's response regarding the noticing is great also. I mean, the notice goes out, the notice is on the building, that, the information is available. I'm just concerned that in our system of identifying these type of uses adjacent to potential scenarios where we might be considering and approving a use that could cause a nuisance, that we might not be capturing all of the sensitive receptors to those potential nuisances. That's all I'm saying. Other questions or discussion on this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Olivas?
excuse me, Commissioner Olivas. In the matter LDC 18-00048 Splash Bar Nightclub, based upon compliance with applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit subject to conditions, and I can make all the findings.
Thank you very much. Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Weisky, I'll second that.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Beat you to it, Commissioner Marshall.
No, well, are you moving to discussion?
Sure.
I wonder if the seconder and the mover might accept an amendment that would change the hours of operation to close at 4, like the last permit. I think that's of some importance to some of our commissioners. I think it might aid things in moving it along.
Commissioners, response. Commissioner Olivas, you made the motion.
Yeah, I don't think I want to change my motion for that. I think that in this neighborhood, and I don't know that 2 hours is going to really change anything, and so I don't think I want to amend my motion for that.
Okay, I have a motion to the same. Commissioner Weisky, you made the second.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Olivas between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. Doesn't seem like a great deal of time to me. Once it gets past midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, it's pretty much all the same if you're going till sunup. So I'll leave my second the same.
Okay, a motion and a second. Stan,
I have one
additional
question.
discussion? Commissioner Hawkins?
We didn't do anything to amend any of the conditions regarding the outside patio and noise level. Do we want to tackle that before we do this?
Commissioner Olivas, I'll throw it back to you. You made the motion.
Okay. I guess to that motion, that's not in there. That's correct. So I would add that no outside amplified speakers in the patio area.
Okay, with that, I can find them all.
Okay, I'll throw it back to Commissioner Weisky for
I'm in
confirmation.
agreement.
Okay, a
Maintain
motion
my
and a
second.
second with that amendment. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Good luck with your project. Okay, we'll move on to item 8.5, case number LDC 18-00050, United Federal Credit Union drive-through, and begin with a presentation from the applicant's representative.
All right. Good evening. My name is Eric Hasty. I'm with Wood Rogers. I'm representing the applicant, United Federal Credit Union, and we're going to talk about one of their properties and some of the improvements to the existing site. The site we're talking about is located northwest of the airport in the industrial area between Mill and Vassar. Specifically, it's located on Bible Way, just north of the intersection of Vassar and Bible. It has a master plan designation of industrial and a zoning designation of industrial commercial with similar surrounding uses. So this has been a a bank for over 40 years, and what we're asking for is a special use permit to allow for a drive-through facility associated with a bank in the industrial commercial zoning. Now, the project, there already is a drive-through facility there, but with the project is proposing is to move that, detach it from the building, and put it on an island. This also includes some pavement rehab and some restriping and some directional change with additional landscaping. So looking at the existing conditions, right now you enter the property, it's one-way entrance, one-way exit. Enter from the northwest. You could either go to the 2 drive-up teller lanes or go to the rest of the property. Parking's located along the landscape median as well as the southern portion and the eastern portion of the parcel. There are 2 drive-up teller lanes right here. This is on the attached building, and there are landscaping with mature trees. So what we're proposing is this is where the existing ATM is. We're detaching it from the building. We're gonna relocate it over here, flip the directional, so the entrance will become the exit and vice versa. The entrance will be on the south, exit on the north, so one-way still. And the two drive-up teller lanes will be consistent with what's existing right now. The parking will be moved from over here on the landscaping side to against the building to improve pedestrian safety. And there will be some existing landscaping that is going to be removed, but with the addition of the new proposed landscaping, there's a net gain of about 350 square feet of landscaping. Majority of the mature viable trees will stay on site, and all the new landscaping will match what is currently there. Because they are removing a large portion of the front of the building, it's going to be getting a facelift. It'll be getting updated. All architectural standards will meet code. Materials will be very similar to what's already existing. Will be a little more modern. And the island itself will match the building. There is 2 existing monument signs on site, and this will most likely be reduced down to 1 monument sign in front of, and located near the entrance. So, in conclusion, this is an SUP to allow a drive-through facility on an established bank. The applicant has read the report written by city staff and has agreed to all the conditions, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Turn it over to staff. Jeff, welcome back.
Good evening, Commission. Jeff Borkhardt, Associate Planner for the record. I'll make this quick. The special use permit is really being triggered by the fact that the drive-through is moving a few feet to the west. That's pretty much what it is. And so, honestly, as part of this, they are reconfiguring the site circulation on the site. They're making the circulation arguably better. One of the other things that's going to come of this, and it's not necessarily demonstrated as part of this, but our code does require that when the cost of the tenant improvements exceed 40% of the most recent assessed value over a 2-year period of time, that landscaping has to be brought into conformance with today's standards. And so the landscaping plan that you see here will actually be even more landscaping once they come through with their building permit. So with that, with the removal and improvement of the circulation and the condition number 4 that we've added to the project, staff does believe that we can make all the findings and recommend approval on this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back to the commission and ask for disclosures. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I visited the site and spoke with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Hawkins visited the site.
Commissioner Gower visited the site, learned that there was a bank there. I didn't know there was, and spoke briefly with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Johnson, I visited the site and had the same reaction that Commissioner Chair Gower had.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Levis, I visited the site and spoke with the applicant's representative.
Okay, thank you very much. I will open the public hearing portion of this item and ask for public comments. Michelle, do you have any requests to speak forms?
No, I do not.
Anyone wishing to make a comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commissions for questions, discussion, or a motion. Commissioner Hawkins.
One question, question for the applicant. In this process, are we removing any mature trees?
Eric Hasty for the record. Yeah, there will be one mature tree that needs to be removed because it's located where the ATM is. The new proposed ATM is going to be, yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Other discussion or a motion? Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I'm prepared to make a motion, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Johnson, in the case of LDC 18-00050 United Federal Credit Union drive-through, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit subject to conditions. I can make all the findings and specifically just want to highlight finding D about providing a safe pedestrian environment. I'm very happy with the change in the circulation for the people visiting the facility. So I can make the findings specifically that one.
Fantastic. I have a motion. How about a second? Commissioner Marshall.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Item 8.6, case number LDC 18-00040 Mountain View Estates. And John is here for a presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. John Krompottek with KLS Planning representing the applicant. I'm going to go through these slides quickly and, of course, reserve plenty of time for questions and interaction with the commissioners. So in brief fashion, you can see there's the highlight of the site. It's phase 3, continuation product. This has been around for several years. Gives a little bit of context of what's going on around there. There is a bit more context just pasting in the project area. It shows kind of the relationship to the existing lots and an extension of those in product type. There's zoning SF4. It's kind of a, different set of zoning. You got the MU on the right side, SF4. Seems to fit well with the area. I say that because we haven't heard any concerns. I think compatibility has been well established in this neighborhood. Given there's 2 phases, we didn't have any real issues with the NAB. They noticed this project as an infill project and recommended it was a good fit for the area. And similarly, to the extent that I know, no opponents at University Ridge, which has been a very vocal neighborhood and community with adjacent development. So I think that says something positive about what we have cooking here. There is the project in a little more detail. This is a footprint mapping townhome project. Of course, the townhome does in fact require the special use permit in addition to fills in 2 small areas on the property that exceed 10 feet in height. So this is phase 3, 75 townhome lots. Again, footprint type of mapping with everything else as open space in the community. 2, 3, and 4 bedroom homes ranging from 1,270 to 2,800 square feet. You'll note that staff put in their report that we have a maximum of 4 bedrooms. That's because parking was one of the key issues that was well established. The analysis that is in your staff report about the sensitivity to parking. And the short, simple story is that we must have 1 parking stall for each bedroom. The way it all worked out, when you look at on-site parking plus off-site parking, we had a maximum of 4 bedroom units. I would state that there is a lot of parking because there's an average of 4 per unit in addition to the street parking. There is a little more detail on the common area. The acronym we used was LCE, limited common elements, limited common area, which is that sort of restricted area directly behind the lots. That's kind of your very private space, landscaped as you wish, and then fenced off for individual privacy. And then sort of the crosshatch area behind it, which is consistent. The way we treat this from lot to lot, back to back, is the more typical common area. And there is a street image of the product that is, I think, the largest one. It shows kind of, I think it's a nice depiction of, the streetscape. A lot of articulation in the elevations. We did meet 4 of the street image standards. I think that's just a fundamental measure of architecture and of quality in the building when you have 4 of those when the code requires 2 for the street image standards. And there is a footprint of one of the houses. So you can see again, in the image to the north, we have two-car garages for each, and then of course the driveway. And obviously this doesn't include the street parking. So in terms of this limited common area, and I don't want to get too much into it, but just the basic concept is there is typical. I highlighted it to show that area behind the lots that includes the private yard area and then the driveway. And there's a little parking summary as already stated. So with that, commissioners, that's all that I have. I'd be pleased to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll get back to you with any questions. And we'll turn it over at this point to Jeff.
Good evening again, Commissioners. Jeff Borkhardt, Associate Planner for the record. As John mentioned, he highlighted the project very well in the intricacies of the project with regards to the parking and the unique aspects of the footprint mapping of the lots and also the limited common elements, which we've seen on a number of projects in recent history. This has actually allowed city staff to work with applicants to have products that fit within that middle range that we're looking for. Rather than your traditional single-family detached house, you could have a single-family either attached or detached with less yard space to take care of, and it makes the product a little bit more affordable because you can shrink the houses down and stuff. And one of the things that I think is very important, John showed the one model that has a two-car garage, but from a planning perspective, there's a number of models that actually have a single car garage, which actually changes the streetscape a little bit. We don't get that as a unique option quite often. I think he had an elevation right there shown. We don't get that unique aspect very often in residential projects. Everybody typically wants to maximize their parking spaces so they can maximize their bedrooms. And in this case, he limited the garage area and provided a side parking space adjacent to the house, which allowed the house to dominate the front instead of the garage to dominate the front, which is a concept that is throughout the master plan as a concept. Is also in our design standards for residential street image standards. With regards, Michelle, if you could switch it back to the overhead. With regards to the fill areas, it's very minor. The highlighted areas in pink there are the areas that are there for fill, and part of that is so that you could have adequate circulation throughout the site. And while doing that, it also helps provide a step down from the east to the west right here. And that step down is made up in those common areas between each one of those lots. And so it provides a unique opportunity to have landscaping between the two instead of have somebody's private slope that may not necessarily be landscaped. So that common area allows for that increased aesthetic value to the property as well. So with that, staff believes that all of these, all the findings can be met. We recommend approval, and we do believe that this is substantially consistent with our master plan. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. I'll bring it back to the commission at this point for disclosures. Commissioner Levis.
Commissioner Levis, I visited the site.
Commissioner Marshall, familiar with the site.
Commissioner Johnson, I visited the site.
Commissioner Gower visited the site, spoke briefly with applicant's representative.
Commissioner Hawkins visited the site.
Commissioner Weisky visited the site.
Okay, thank you very much. I will open the public hearing portion of this item and see if there's any public comment. Michelle, do you have any requests to speak forms?
No, I do not.
Nope. Anyone wishing to make a public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll close that, bring it back to the commission and ask for questions or discussion.
Thank you,
Commissioner
Chair. Staff, please. Jeff, can you show me the traffic flow in and out of this development?
I have an aerial that I can pull up. So we also have our engineer Shawnee here as well on the project, but this is US 395. There is an opportunity to come into the site using Ferrari McLeod coming this way. There's also an alternative using Betty Lane as well to come into the site. And so they would access it through Ferrari McLeod is where I take to get up to this location.
One question for the applicant.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hawkins.
John, 5 months ago, we met here discussing the zone change of this specific property.
Right. Not this property, the one adjacent to it to the south and west.
So this isn't the same one we discussed?
This is not the same one.
Okay, that's all.
Okay,
Thanks.
fair enough.
Other questions? Discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Weisky.
Mr. Chairman, in the case of LDC 18-00040, Mountain View Estates, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the tentative map and special use permit, subject to the conditions, and I can make all of the conditions.
Thank you very much. Have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner
Second,
Hawkins?
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Good luck with the project. All right, we'll move on to item number 9, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Reports. I do not have any updates. We have not had a meeting, and I don't believe we have a meeting officially scheduled in the near future. Are we having that meeting?
Can you talk into the microphone, please?
Yeah, I thought it was April 14th instead
April.
of March 14th.
April
yeah.
14th. Yeah, we've got a little ways to go. Okay, turn it over to Claudia, item number 10, staff announcements.
Thank you. Claudia Hanson, Planning Manager. Your next agenda is going to be quite a full evening, so get a good night's sleep the night before. And to update you on past council action at their last meeting last week, the Double R Apartments project was certified, which was an amendment to the Double Diamond Handbook. The McCarran Sutro Master Plan Amendment was certified. The Sutro zone change was approved by City Council after 2 continuances, I believe. Meridian 120 is a tentative map that was approved by, that was denied by Planning Commission. Technical denial, that was continued again by City Council. So you're not the only ones that continue items, just throwing that out there. So that one's been continued a couple of times. And the direction on that is to have additional outreach with the neighbors. And then at the 6 o'clock last week, there was an appeal brought forward by Councilwoman Breckus. It was an appeal of a decision made by the Historical Resources Commission, the HRC. They approved what's called a certificate of appropriateness, which is a physical change to a property located on the local register. This is the Chrissy Collin House out on Mayberry. And the proposal was to add single-story office buildings in the rear of the property, so back where they have done the additions of some accessory buildings that were associated with the nursery that were out there, so kind of back in that area behind the house, not up in the front yard. And the HRC had approved those modifications to the property. This was appealed by Councilwoman Breckus to City Council. So that does not go to Planning Commission or the hearing officer, it goes straight to City Council. The City Council was unable to, I'm gonna look at the attorneys to make sure I word this correctly. The City Council was unable to have a motion pass.
Yeah, but it was unable to take any action, so
Unable to
no
take
action was
action.
taken.
So therefore, the appeal fails. Yeah, so the appeal fails. So that can be reconsidered, and it's my understanding that's being discussed at this time, but the appeal did fail at this time. That's all I have at this time.
Okay, thanks very much, Claudia. Item number 11, Commissioners' suggestions for future agenda items. Nope. Public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. Seeing no one left in the chambers to make a comment, we'll move on to item 13, adjournment. How about a motion? How about a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye.